G'day fellow flight sims and random YouTubers. Yes, I know the title sounds a bit strange. Yeah, why should I draw Don't Trust SimBrief? But it's very, very true. And unfortunately, and I've seen it time and time again, as many who of those who know me on air traffic or on ATC, I see too many flight plans, and you look at it and said, "Oh, I bet you this person A used SimBrief and B didn't really analyse it and see what SimBrief was outputting." So, my statement: why should you trust or don't trust SimBrief? Well, without further ado, let's have a look. Okay, so we can see here I've planned a flight, and we're going from Sydney to Brisbane, and the Auckland is the Gold Coast, and I'm flying a 737 cost index, and I've basically asked SimBrief to give me, and this is their flight plan. Okay, now the first thing is when you look under optional extras, have a look at this: departure runway 07. Okay, you think, oh yeah, okay, well why not? Well, if you click this little cloud and you have a look at here, runway 07, yes, you've got a headwind of 6 knots, and it favours the most important part, or the headwind. Okay, so you say, oh well, that's great, yeah, runway 07, the biggest headwind component, why not? We'll take off runway 07. Yep, okay. Now, if we look at this flight plan here, and we find or SID a star, we click find or SID and star, look at that, it says it does not connect with any SIDs or stars. So that there is a warning sign, a warning bell, okay, to think, well, maybe runway 07, it doesn't give you any SID. So that's your first sort of thing. The next thing is, and I always like to check, even though it's not always possible, I always like to check these routes against real flight routes. And as you people in Australia know, Sydney to Brisbane is a common route. So let's go, I use what they call Flight Aware. And Flight Aware, and we'll look at here. This is a Virgin flight, and it's on its way, and it's going from Sydney to Brisbane, as you can see. But if we scroll down here, and we look at this flight data, we have a look at that. Now, if we have a look at that, it doesn't quite match up to what SimBrief's given us, because it's given us the TSAT. Now, TSAT is a waypoint which is basically over Sydney, and it will not, that's why it's not giving you any SIDs or stars. So what I do normally is I just basically copy this, right? I put it in there, and not only that, if you can see this particular one took off from runway 16 left. So now SimBrief comes up and said, do you want to select new SIDs and stars? Yes, I do. Now, when I do that and find the SID and stars, look at that, by magic. It says, off runway 16 left, you've got the Kevin 7 SID departure, and the star, of course, is the Gomel 3 X-ray. So that there is a real-world flight. Now, sometimes, of course, it's not possible to find exactly the real-world flights, and so you've got to use a little bit of nous. Now, if I click on Sky Vector, and you have a look at Sky Vector, and you click on the high routes, you can see that there is a valid flight. It's sticking to all the airways, all the way up to Brisbane. So that's one instance. Okay, here's another one. We're planning to depart Sydney and we're going to Melbourne. And once again, because SimBrief throws us onto the runway which has got the greatest component of headwind, which is not necessarily the favourable one because of operational requirements, you can see here that we have a look at the flight plan and we analyse the route and we find the SID and star. Once again, we get this message. So you've got to think, well, let's go back and see, well, in Sydney, where are they departing from? So what I do is, once again, I go back and look for real world flight. And Sydney to Melbourne is, well, it's probably one of the busiest routes in Australia, if not the busiest. And we have a look, at an aircraft that's on its way, so Qantas 443. And you can see here, it's taken off from runway 16 right. So if we go back to SimBrief, and it all starts with this problem, not being able to find a SID star, all starts with the fact that it's allocated the now have a look at this. Now, because you've selected the runway, which fits in with a SID, of course, now it gives you the Campy 6 and the Lizzie 9 Alpha arrival. So once again, always look at the runways you're taking off, because that will present, if you don't select the right runway, then you don't end up with the right SID or star even. So SimBrief doesn't always give you the best flight plan. You can see here, of course, once you've selected the right departure runway and the right arrival, it gives you the, now, just to go back, sorry, I'll just close that. And once again, we go back to our trusty sky vector. And it's always good to check, and you can see it's all going along the right airway. The Q29 gets to Lizzie, and you can see if we go to the arrival runway, and we see that runway 27 is heavily favoured. So runway 27 more often than not will be the arrival runway for Melbourne. So it's always a good idea, always check, because time and time again I've seen people flying online and I said, where did you get that flight plan? Oh, I got it off SimBrief. Oh, well, that's the holy grail then, is it? No, you've got to analyse and just be very aware that SimBrief doesn't always, either A, doesn't give you always the best runway, or B, it doesn't actually give you the best the best route. So always check, if you can, against real world flights, or if not, then maybe use Sky Vector, which is a very handy tool. Make sure it's the route is adhering to the right airways that you're travelling on. And a common one that I've seen, and just to, I've seen so many times people plan from Sydney to Melbourne and they arrive via Boree, not Boree, sorry. I'm just trying to think now. Boise, sorry. And now if you have a look at all the star arrivals into Melbourne via Boise, Boise is a common waypoint for arrivals for non-jet aircraft, i.e. the Dash 800s, etc., or the propeller aircraft. So that's another thing you've got to be aware of. But always be analytical, or try to just check whatever's been thrown at you. What the old story, garbage in is garbage out with software. So you always have to double check. Okay, so that's my 2 bobs worth. I hope that just sort of raises a bit of an awareness of what, even though I must admit, it's a great tool, especially in fuel planning. And having said that, now here's another thing as well. And you said that this flight is going from Sydney to Melbourne, and the alternate is Sydney. So you mean to tell me if the weather's not fine in Melbourne, you're going to go and turn all the way back and go back all the way back to Sydney when you can either land in, worst case scenario, Canberra, but there's Avalon. So, because if you have a look down here, if I generate this flight, have a look at the amount of fuel. You almost 7.1 tonnes of fuel. Okay? So you're carrying all this fuel when really an alternate airport could be Avalon, or worst case scenario, you could go back to Canberra. So that's another thing. So if I edit this flight and instead of going Sydney all the way back to Sydney, you put Avalon, which is YMAV, and then generate the flight. Now look how much fuel we're carrying. Only 5.5. So rather than the 7.1. So that's nearly a half a tonne. So once again, always be critical. Make sure that everything the SimBrief spits out, just use common sense and say, well, it just seems ludicrous that if I don't have the right condition in Melbourne, I've got to fly all the way back to Sydney carrying all that fuel. It's just ludicrous. So be very analytical of what SimBrief does. Okay, let's hope that that's enough from me. There's another thing too. Sorry, I don't want to make this too long. People use SimBrief for VFR flight planning. Well, there's only one thing for me to say about that. Do not use SimBrief for VFR. And I know they've encapsulated, they've put in VFR maps, but they're not real VFR maps. They're just a hybrid of what Sky Vector has and some other cockamamie source. But do not use. There are other tools out there for VFR flight planning, and of course I personally use little NavMap, but there's Plan G, and if you're flying within this area here, well, in Australia we've got what they call VTC and VNC. VTC means vertical termination chart, VNC means visual navigation charts. So use those. They're on the AIP site. So if I go to charts, aeronautical information package, I scroll down here and I look at charts and I look at VNC, VTC. And they're your VFR charts. So let's say, for example, I want to fly around the Perth area, Melbourne. It's got all these charts for all the local areas around here. Now, of course, if I want to fly a little bit further out, then you've got this. So Adelaide is the visual terminal charts. Shows you a greater area. Use these. You can use all these charts. So you can go from Brisbane all the way up to Cairns, and if you've downloaded all these charts, you can fly all the way from Brisbane to Cairns using these charts. Now, of course, if you want to fly to Darwin to Broome VFR, well, yeah, good luck. You're not going to, unless you're going to hug the coast. But on the East Coast, you've got all these terminal charts you can fly or use to fly VFR. Okay, so that's my 2 bobs worth. I hope that's raised awareness, and until next time, see you all later. Cheers.